Federal All Candidates Evening organized by Huron Chamber of Commerce, Lakeshore United Church, Engage Goderich, Rotaract Goderich, and the Menacet HOA. I think I got it right that time. You will have met some of the many volunteers on the way in, and there are even more behind the scenes, behind that door. We'd like to also thank Chamber Advocate sponsors, Libro Credit Union, Goderich Signal Star, and CKNX. As well, thank you to Wendy's of Goderich. They're going to be our beverage sponsor this evening. We'll have some beverages and some ice cream after the event downstairs. I'd also like to offer a special thanks to Shelley and Hudson War, our audiovisual specialists, and Sandra Bilson from Huron County Toastmasters for timing the event. I would also like to welcome everyone at home on Rogers TV Cable 6 Kincardine. Tonight we're joined by the 5 candidates participating for the electoral district of Huron Bruce. We welcome them here tonight to help us be informed voters as we participate in the democratic process. It's now my privilege to introduce our moderator for the evening. She's a retired planner for Huron County, an experienced farm owner, extensive background working with nonprofits, and she has been involved with business planning, government, urban and rural planning, and rural development. Ladies and gentlemen, Carol Leeming.
Thank you, Mark. It's my privilege tonight to be your moderator, and with our 5 candidates this evening, they've already drawn their order of speaking. But before I go forward with that, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening to our All Candidates meeting here in Goderich. And I know you all have a great interest in hearing what our candidates have to say this evening by your presence here tonight. So I look forward to the conversation and the discussion and to the hearing from each of the candidates tonight. I have the opportunity as well to read out some of the rules that and guidelines for this evening, and I'll just go through those quickly with you. I know they've been displayed on the overhead as well. So first off, I'd like everyone to please shut off their cell phones or put them on vibrate, as well as please refrain from taping this evening. If you're still wearing a campaign-related button or carrying a banner, we ask that you remove it or place it out of sight until the end of the moderated event. Candidates have already drawn for their speaking order. The candidates have all agreed to some basic rules ahead of time, including their seating and speaking order. Candidates will be given warning by our volunteer timekeepers from Toastmasters that time is running out at 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and 0-second intervals. Each candidate will be allotted 3 minutes to make an opening statement and 5 minutes for a closing statement this evening. The order of those statements will be determined and have been determined in advance by a draw. At no time are they allowed to interrupt one another. Questions from the audience, online and in person, will be directed to the candidate indicated, and each candidate will have 2 minutes for each question afterwards. At the door, you are handed the rules for the evening and 2 cards. These are for written questions, which will be collected by runners who are monitoring the room. So if you have a question, please write it down, hold it up, so that one of the runners can collect those. I have decided the order of answering by the candidates based on a rotation, so we'll be rotating through the evening, so everyone gets a chance to go first. I ask you to be respectful of candidates and of each other this evening. The candidate to whom the question is directed will have 2 minutes to respond. Each of the other candidates will also have 2 minutes to comment on that question. Each candidate will be given 5 minutes for closing statements. The order will be reversed from the opening statements. The formal portion of our evening will end at approximately 8:45. But candidates and the public are welcome to stay for refreshments and mingling until 9:30, and that will be held in the basement. So those are the rules and the guidelines for tonight. I ask those in the audience and on stage to respect those rules as outlined. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the candidates for Huron Bruce as they are seated in alphabetical order, started at my far right. we have Kevin Clerks of the People Party of Canada, Ben Lobb of the Progressive Conservative Party, Tony McQuail of the NDP Party, Alan Thompson of the Liberal Party, and Nicholas Wendler of the Green Party. So those are our candidates. So now we get to hear their opening statements, and by drawing prior to our session this evening, we will begin with Tony McQuail.
Well, good evening, friends and neighbors in Huron Bruce. Politics can be divisive, but in the end, we all have to live together in community, and that's why politics is also so important. I first ran for office almost 40 years ago as a young farmer because I was concerned, unfortunately, with many of the same issues that we confront today. The environment, the inequity in terms of how ordinary people were treated versus the elite, and the need to have a truly representative democracy where every vote counted. So, running this time, I have 3 words. My 3 R's are representation, regeneration, and redistribution. And in my opening remarks, I'm going to focus on representation, because democracy at its best is the way we find the collective wisdom of our society and then move forward in a consistent, steady manner to implement that wisdom. But unfortunately, it doesn't work unless everybody is represented and everybody's at the table. So I wanted to ask, how many of you believe that your vote should count for representation every time you make the effort to cast it in an election? I believe in participatory active, so this is your chance to raise your hands. How many people believe that your vote should count every election? And how many of you believe that your neighbor's vote should count for representation in every election? Right. You know, Mr. Trudeau told us that we really didn't care and we really didn't think it was important after promising time after time in 2015 that he would change the system so that every vote counted. He let us down. In fact, I firmly believe he lied to us, and lied to us quite intentionally, to steal Green, NDP, and even Conservative votes in staunch Liberal or NDP ridings in the 2015 election. But it's really tragic because, you know, the first time our electoral system was studied was in 1923, came back recommending proportional representation. Studied again in 1934. We've known for nearly 100 years how to fix the system, but successive Liberal and Conservative phony majority governments haven't done the job. We can do better. It may be okay with them to have 9 million Canadians cast votes in this coming election that won't count, that won't get any representation. But it's not okay with me, and it's not okay with the New Democrats. We're proposing setting up a citizens' assembly to design an effective proportional representation so that your vote and your neighbor's vote counts in every election, so that we actually have governments that represent the majority of Canadians making the decisions on behalf of us all. I think it's important, and I thank you for your time.
Next, I'll call on Ben Lobb of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ben Lobb, and I'm the Conservative candidate for the riding of Huron Bruce. I would like to thank the Huron Chamber of Commerce and all the participating organizations for hosting tonight's debate. And I'd like to congratulate all the candidates and thank everyone in attendance here tonight. A new Conservative government will work with Canadians to build a better Canada, more prosperous Canada. We will invest in rural infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, bridges, and community centers. We will rebuild our relationship with our largest trading partners. China has banned beef, pork, soybeans, and canola. This has cost the Canadian economy over $1 billion. Our relationship with India has deteriorated. They've added tariffs to many ag products that we export to them. And then the United States. We've had tariffs on steel and aluminum, softwood lumber disputes that spans 2 presidents, and an unprecedented Buy America provision. a renegotiated NAFTA deal that left little, if any, gains for Canada. We will once again make sure that agriculture and rural communities become a priority. We'll fix the taxation rule for small businesses who are incorporated. We'll make it easier for first-time home buyers to achieve their dream of home ownership. We'll encourage investment to come back in our resource sector in Canada. Canadians are missing out on $15 billion a year in economic advantage. We'll develop our resources while implementing comprehensive environmental plans that support new technology, environmental preservation, and encourage the rest of the world to buy our resources with the highest environmental standards. Government that puts more money in your pockets so that you can get ahead. If you work hard, you should be able to buy a home, save for retirement, care for your children and your parents as they age. We're going to take the GST off home heating bills. We're going to scrap the carbon tax. We're going to make maternal benefits tax-free. We're going to introduce a sports and fitness tax credit. We're going to lower personal income taxes, and we're going to balance the budget. We're going to increase the government registered education savings plan contribution. We're going to increase the age credit for seniors by $1,000, and we're going to maintain health and social transfers. In addition to that, we're creating a $1.5 billion fund to help CAT scan and MRI machines become a reality in our communities. On October 21st, I ask you to vote Ben Lobb, vote Conservative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Thompson, Liberal Party.
Thank you very much to our hosts this evening for a really important event. These events are very important for our democracy. And thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. I'm sure that by now, like me, you're probably getting pretty tired of political talking points and mudslinging. You deserve to know what your next MP can do for you and what they have to offer to you. That should be the focus tonight. So first, just allow me to briefly introduce myself. I was born and raised on a family farm near Glamis. I learned a lot of things from my parents growing up. Two things that stick with me most: the importance of being positive and the value of hard work. I made my career as a journalist and a teacher. I think this matters as a candidate to be your MP because it was my job to listen to people. That's what I did for a living. You have a right to ask, what can your MP do for you? I ran in 2015 and present myself as a candidate again now for one simple reason. Huron Bruce needs a stronger voice in Ottawa. You deserve a proactive, ambitious MP who is willing to work hard for you. And to be heard in Ottawa, you have to listen in Huron Bruce. As a candidate, I have tried to visit every small town and village in this riding to listen to you, to knock on your doors and hear your concerns. Too many decisions in this country are made by people in the city. I have made it my mission within the Liberal Party to push for more attention to rural issues. I want to be a voice for rural Canada and Huron Bruce within a Liberal government. It has been a long time since Huron Bruce has had a voice heard above the louder urban voices in Ottawa. That needs to change. I can deliver that change. This election, two competing visions for our country are in front of you. My view is we need to move forward. This is a choice between moving forward or moving back to the policies of the Harper years. The contrast between these two competing visions is most stark on the issue of climate change, with the Liberal Party proposing a dramatic plan to reach net zero emissions by 2050, pumping billions of dollars into investments in green technology. That vision builds on the success of the Canada Child Benefit, creating hundreds of thousands of new childcare spaces, increasing support for our seniors, moving toward a national pharmacare plan. At the national election level, this election is about a choice between Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer. I will put it to you this way: Canada cannot afford another Doug Ford.
Next, I'll call on Nicholas Wendler, the Green Party.
I decided to run because I feel like climate change is something that needs a voice and in this riding, and I also believe in representation, proportional representation, that every vote does count. And so I felt like I wanted to run to be the Green Party candidate again, like I did in June. It'll be my third election now. Federal in 2015 in Kitchener Center, then here in June 2018, and now. Yeah.
Calling on Kevin Clark's People Party of Canada.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Clerks, and I am the candidate for the People's Party of Canada here in Huron Bruce. I was born and raised in Bruce County in the small town of Chesley, Ontario. I lived in town right across from a farm, the community center, and my high school. Growing up, I walked to school every day. I played hide and seek and tag with my friends, and I always made it home in time when the streetlights came on. My high school had a total of 350 students. Most of them bussed in from farms surrounding our community. My grade 12 graduating class was somewhere around 200 students. It's a good thing we had a big stage. And I'm proud to live in what I believe is the most beautiful part of southwestern Ontario. My experience is in retail for over 30 years now. I've done everything from pushing shopping carts to managing a team of people and even owning my own store. I've lived and worked in Nunavut, Alberta, throughout this area, and even down in the US and Ohio. I currently live near Tiverton in the hamlet of Inverhuron, right along the lakeshore, and commute to Port Elgin every day to get to work. I'm not looking forward to winter. I stand for freedom and fairness, respect, and personal responsibility. I stand for what I support, not for what I oppose. I am a proud Canadian. I got involved in the grassroots People's Party of Canada because I agree with the platform. It appeals to my traditional, conservative, rural, small-town roots, but doesn't ignore the fact that there is a big world out there right across the lake. If something I say tonight appeals to you, then you need to consider becoming a member and supporter of the People's Party of Canada. Thank you.
That concludes our opening remarks from each of the candidates. We'll now move into the questions that have been submitted prior to this evening, and they're in the basket before me. There are a number of questions in this basket, and 3 of them will be selected and answered this evening. If I could remind you before I pick my first question out of the basket, if you do have a question yourself this evening, please write it down on the paper that you are handed out tonight and hold it up in the air for someone to collect. We'll be moving on to those questions following the 3 out of this basket. All right, so just picking a question out of random. I'll read the question twice, and then I'll move on to the first person to respond to that, other than if it is directed to someone. Okay, so this question is directed to Alan Thompson. So he will be the first one to respond, and then we'll follow through in the order on my sheet here following that. So the question is, if elected, how would you represent your riding of Huron Bruce? What have you done to understand the priorities, issues of your local constituency? So again, I'll just repeat that, and it is directed at Alan Thompson, to be followed by the other candidates. Question: if elected, how would you represent your riding of Huron Bruce? What have you done to understand the priorities, issues of your local constituency? Alan.
Thank you. I did run in 2015. I came a very close second to Mr. Lobb and made considerable gains. I learned a lot from that election and have spent pretty much most of the last 4 years traveling around Huron Bruce, speaking with as many people as possible, attending events, being on the ground in communities, wearing out a few pairs of shoes, eating lots of pie, and visiting church suppers. I just think it's very, very important for the Member of Parliament to be present in the community, to be engaging with as many people as possible. Also, shortly after that election, I proposed to the Liberal Party we should study how our party could reach out more effectively to people who live in rural ridings, and I led that study and made a number of recommendations. Since then, we've seen the results of that. The Liberal government appointed a Minister of Rural Economic Development and made terrific progress on that file. I think you'll be able to put this question to all of your candidates tonight. I feel very strongly that a Member of Parliament not only needs to listen to the riding and be heard in Ottawa, but needs to reflect what you see going on around you. I think an MP has to engage with everyone, with as many organizations as possible, take part in community events, whether they're controversial or mainstream or fall fairs or out of the ordinary. I think you can expect your Member of Parliament to work as hard for you as they possibly can and to use every tool that's available to them to celebrate what's going on in our riding. And I think social media and the tools that are available to us now in this era make it possible to communicate much more effectively and to celebrate what's happening on the ground in Huron Bruce.
I'll call on Nicholas Wendler as the second answer, if you wish to answer this question. So again, the question is, if elected, would you represent your riding, or if elected, how would you represent your riding of Huron Bruce? What have you done to understand the priorities and issues of your local constituency?
I feel like it would be easy for the Green Party candidate to represent local riding, because we're a grassroots party and we have a policy of no whipped votes, so we can vote against the party. I've grown up here all my life, except for when I went to post-secondary school in Kitchener area, and understand what it's like to live here, especially as a person with a disability, a physical disability, I should say. Yeah.
And Kevin Clerks. And repeat the question?
Yes, please.
If elected, how would you represent your riding of Huron Bruce? What have you done to understand the priorities, issues of your local constituency?
Well, I think by representing a riding, we actually have to have a voice in Ottawa, and I haven't seen that happening. I I believe we need to stand up and we need to speak up and we need to be heard, because we're not the big city. We're the small town. We're the farm. We're the seniors. We don't have that voice that we're supposed to have. That's what representation is. By doing that, I'm going to bring the issues of our riding to Ottawa, because make no mistake, when I go to Ottawa, I don't represent myself or the People's Party. I represent all of you. Social media is an excellent way of reaching people, but it's not the only way. It involves going to people's homes, going to events, talking to people. That's what I've been doing for the last not only 4 months, but I was part of the setting up of the EDA here in this riding. So I've been doing this for a year now. And I can tell you that social media is great, but it's not us. I mean, it's the round the table dining room discussions. It's sitting around the campfire. It's talking in the coffee shop, which I've done a few times this week already. I think to represent this riding in Ottawa accurately, you need to be able to talk directly to the people. And I hope to do that for you.
Thanks very much. I believe that any one of the individuals up here, if elected, would do their very best to represent the riding of Huron Bruce. I don't know that it makes much sense to slam one over the other, whether who would do the better job or not, because I believe all the individuals up here would try their very best. What I can tell the folks here tonight is that I believe I'm probably one of the most accessible MPs you'll find. I attend 200 to 300 events every year for 11 years straight. I have hundreds of meetings each and every year. You can see me at the hockey arena just about any weekend when hockey season is going, the soccer field, the baseball diamond, wherever it may be, or even at the grocery store. And that happens all the time. It is very important. You can speak as much as you want, and you can rattle the can as loud as you want, but I have a different approach, and my approach is a non-partisan approach to work with all parties. And you can ask people like Hetty Fry, Libby Davies, you can ask anyone. I have a tremendous working relationship with all the members of Parliament, so that when Saugeen Shores needs meetings with Liberal members of Parliament and Liberal cabinet ministers, because I haven't burnt all my bridges, I can set up those meetings. And I have set up those meetings. Those are very important to me. The Southampton Legion needed something done. I went over and talked to Harjit Sajjan, the Minister of Defense, and he was able to get it done for the Southampton Legion. So that's what I believe. I believe it's in having a productive relationship with all 338, 337 members of Parliament. And you don't have to be on social media every day. You don't have to be on the radio every 5 seconds to be an effective member of Parliament. So that's what I would say. But when someone texts me on Boxing Day that they've lost their passport in Sweden, we get it done. When we host passport clinics in every community virtually, we get it done. We've helped to process over
And Tony McQuail.
Well, this is the 7th election I've run in, and one of the great things about being a candidate is getting to talk to people and listen to people. And I've had a lot of opportunity over the years to visit the towns and watch the riding change. At one point it was Huron, then it was Huron Bruce from Highway 8 up into Bruce County. Now it's all of Huron and a big hunk of Bruce. So I have a sense of it. I've lived my whole adult life here in Huron Bruce. But I also want to talk about what it means to be a member of Parliament. We're all participants in the political process because we all pay taxes and we all bear the brunt of the decisions that are made in Parliament. And so while it's nice to eat pie and it's nice to kiss babies and it's nice to be at things, I think what you need is a parliamentarian who's working on legislation that actually helps ordinary people. And that's why I'm running in this election. I've served as the president of both the Huron Federation of Agriculture and the Huron Local of the National Farmers Union. I've served on a lot of committees with people, but one of the things I'm proud of is that when I helped the Minister of Agriculture as his executive assistant, we developed the Environmental Farm Plan for Ontario and also the Stable Funding Program for farm businesses to contribute to their local federation or the Christian Farmers Federation or the NFU, so that farmers would have a stronger voice in dealing with proposals for legislation and change. So it's helping work with people. And if I'm your MP, one of the things that I will work on very hard is to help figure out what resources we can get from Ottawa to help us an experiment in creating real solutions to problems like climate change and inequity that we can apply in a rural area like ours, so that we're not waiting for bureaucrats in the city to do it.
Okay, thank you everyone for question 1. We'll just pull out question 2. This question is directed at Ben Lobb, so he will have the opportunity to answer it first, and followed by the other candidates. The question: the Social Research and Planning Council commissioned a report called "How Much is Enough?" that looked at individuals living on less than a living wage. What was found was that half the residents in this county were impacted by living on less than a living wage. The disparity of wealth is significant in these counties, and as a result, a call for a poverty reduction strategy was highlighted as a need, which the Social Research and Planning Council is embarking on. As we look to minimize poverty in these counties and country, what is your party's perspective on reestablishing a uniform, freestanding federal minimum wage or living wage? Ben.
Thank you for the question. The first thing that we do need to focus on in this area is housing, and whether it's detached, semi-detached, affordable housing, etc. That is vitally important and virtually in need in every community. In addition to that, in the last few years, we definitely have had some inflationary issues, and I believe that some of that has been brought on by the carbon tax and other plans. And so what I would say is that the plan that Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party have brought forward, by taking the GST off home heating fuels, by doing a universal tax cut, items like that actually make a difference in people's bottom line. And again, we also have to remember we need great jobs. We need good jobs, and we have to make sure that employers are competitive in the price that they pay, but we also have to get rid of the red tape and the burden that often causes good small businesses in our community to be unable to pay all those top dollars that they would like to do. So two approaches. One is make sure our economy keeps to roll along, to make sure that we have good paying jobs, but also to be able to support those people in need, to have good housing and financial support. Thank you.
Next, I'll call on Alan Thompson.
I was fortunate to be at the event where that report was released, and I think it was pretty stunning for a lot of people in the room to realize that close to half of people in Huron County live beneath what was considered to be the living wage in that report. And you don't have to knock on very many doors in our communities to discover the incredible disparity between people who are doing really well in life and some others who are really struggling to survive. And it's at both ends of the spectrum. Young people starting out their lives that can't find housing, older people who are struggling with the cost of living. I think everything that we do as a government needs to focus on those who need our help. So when you're talking about cutting taxes, Ben was referring to a universal tax cut. Well, when you cut taxes for everyone, who benefits most? The wealthy. It's simple math. I think we should be cutting taxes, and this is the proposal, cut taxes for middle income and lower, so that those who really need a break get it from those tax cuts. The Canada Child Benefit was a program that the Liberal government created. It has in some measure come close to fostering almost basic income for those who receive it. 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty in this country through the Canada Child Benefit because it is tax-free, because it is not universal. It does not go to wealthy families who don't need that assistance. It goes to people in the lower incomes. Time and again, I think we need to focus on those who need their government to help them. And this, again, is this divide, I think, is becoming more and more apparent between the approach that the Liberal government is putting forward and the ideas from Mr. Scheer.
And Nicholas Wendler.
We would have a universal basic income, and I would believe that would involve other programs that are already in place and cut red tape that's involved in some of those programs and make it easier on people and give them more income.
And Kevin Clerks.
Well, as one of the people here that earns pretty close to minimum wage in my retail job, I can certainly relate to the struggles of low-income people in this area. And let me tell you that $14 an hour is not enough to live on in this area. But the way we do it is not by offering more benefits and more plans and everything. It's by cutting taxes. 42 cents of every dollar is going towards taxes, and there are parties here that want to support the carbon tax or carbon pricing that'll just raise our taxes even more. I'm sorry, but I already pay enough taxes. Now, when it comes to the People's Party, we want to lower your taxes. So if you're going to be earning up to $15,000, you're not going to pay federal tax. 15 to 100,000, you're going to be taxed 15%. And if you're making over 100,000, you'll pay 25%. Now, does this help the rich people? Perhaps. But it's those rich people that own the businesses that we work in. It's those rich people that help us build the highways and the schools and everything else. So it's one thing to say you don't want to help the rich, but we work together in this community. It's not a haves and have-nots. It's everybody working together. When it comes to corporate taxes, we do want to lower those from 15 to 10% to make it easier for businesses to expand and to hire more people. And we expand the accelerated capital cost. When you're writing off investments in your business, we want to lower that to 3 years from the 15 so that you can have more money to expand your business and hire more people. You know, I'm tired of taxes. We're one of the highest taxed people in Canada. And I know because I've lived across Canada. And taxation is key. If we
And Tony McQuill.
Well, I would encourage you to Google NDP commitments. There's a comprehensive program there that talks about raising taxes on the ultra wealthy, putting corporate taxes back to where they were in 2010. Because friends, haven't you heard this mantra before? We'll lower the taxes and we'll get your services better. It doesn't work that way. My father was an accountant. If I offer you a $100 tax break and then cut your services by $1,000, are you ahead? You know, we're not doing this well or effectively. What we are is impoverishing poverty even more by the way we're managing the tax cuts, because the people who benefit the most are the wealthiest and have continued to be. We've been funneling wealth to the top, and it's not been trickling down. It's been going sideways to the Grand Caymans and other places, because the really wealthy don't live in our communities anymore. They don't run the local factory. Trickle down may have worked, but it doesn't work anymore. The things we're talking about is a head-to-toe health care so that pharmacare, pharmaceuticals, and dental is included in the same way that our current health is. And that will benefit everybody. And the poorest among us will benefit from it. Whereas tax breaks only benefit you if you're paying taxes. And the truly poor, the working poor, aren't paying taxes to the extent that they get much from any of these tax breaks. So it's the important thing of dealing with student debt as well, and also housing. So our commitments in this abbreviated form, but are also available in a full document, are well worth having a look at, because they're a thoughtful, comprehensive way of both addressing some of the inequities in our tax system now, which has been shifting it more and more to the poor and the middle class, and addressing the kind of services that will be beneficial to Canadians across the country and across the economy.
All right, just drawing the third and final question out of this basket. This question is not directed at anyone specifically. My first person to answer it will be Nicholas Wendler. So the question is, the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers confirm that Canadian individuals and companies avoid paying approximately $14 billion in Canadian taxes each year. These figures are confirmed by the Auditor General of Canada. Previous federal governments have, to a large extent, been unsuccessful in recouping this loss. What would you advise your caucus to do after this unfair tax loophole, if elected?
We would advise closing loopholes. I think this part of our costing that was released today involves closing loopholes and to create income for social spending that we plan to do.
To Kevin, I can repeat the question if required.
Yes, please.
Repeat it? Okay. The Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers confirm that Canadian individuals and companies avoid paying approximately $14 billion in Canadian taxes each year. These figures are confirmed by the Auditor General of Canada. Previous federal governments have, to a large extent, been unsuccessful in recouping this loss. What would you advise your caucus to do about this unfair tax loophole if elected?
Well, let me tell you, the term loophole seems to be coming up a lot lately, and it's not being resolved. Whether it's loopholes in taxation, or it's loopholes in migration, or it's money leaving the country through various means, through foreign aid and everything else. We don't just favor the rich according to the Panama Papers, we favor everyone else. And it's time we started to look at our country and to direct that money back into our country and keep it in our country, whether it be from healthcare, offering better services that will keep people from leaving the country, or whether it's going after the violators on our taxes and being more aggressive in collecting from those who owe. It's closing loopholes. Things that have been around for 20 years, 30 years that nobody's done anything about because our group, our other politicians, are catering to the special interest groups and they're catering to the elitists. And I'm tired of it. We need to close the loopholes. We need to do something about it. And, you know, we can go back and forth for generations and nothing's getting done. It's time we move forward and get things done. Thank you.
Next, I'll call on Tony McWhale.
we're very clear that it's time to ensure that people who should be paying their taxes are paying their taxes, both closing loopholes and also increasing taxes on the wealthiest, people with over $20 million. Because, you know, who uses services the most? Who uses the airports? Who uses the ports? Who uses the roads? The poor don't use them near as much as those who are wealthy, whose businesses are using all those facilities. So our infrastructure that we've created as a nation and as a country are also being well used, and they ought to be paying their fair share. But there's another thing here that we need to keep in mind, and that is the history of our democracy. The liberals and conservatives were serving the 1% before women and ordinary working people got the vote after the First World War. And they're still, in fact, when you look at how vigorously or non-vigorously they deal with things like tax evasion and tax legislation, are still serving that 1%. And that's part of why I'm running as a New Democrat and why I decided to run as a New Democrat in the 1980s. At that time, they were enriching the banks with high interest rate policy. And I felt that it would make a lot more sense to be a backbencher in a party, or not get elected even, that I'd be much happier as a farmer not elected than serving as a backbencher in parties that in effect propped up the elite while letting ordinary people suffer. And so, yes, I think we need to close those loopholes. I think we also need to reinvest that money in things that do useful work for ordinary people across our communities. So, yeah, close the loophole for sure. That's one of the things we've been talking about for a long time. And it's certainly one of the things we will do in government, or if we're holding somebody in power as a minority government.
Next, call on Ben Lobb.
This has gone on for a long time, and the Panama Papers it's a disgrace. And there's a couple issues, and one of the issues is that these wealthy people go to high-priced tax preparers and accountants, and they create these schemes to funnel the money down there. And then when CRA finally catches up with them, or whoever it is, then they negotiate. And in that case, it was PricewaterhouseCoopers or Ernst & Young, and they negotiate with CRA, and the minister signs off on it, and it's at a fraction of what the penalty and the interest should be. Now, if one of us get into a tax problem, guess what? You don't get a deal. You pay the full price, and you pay the penalty. And I've gone to Windsor, to the CRA office when it was open down there, and gone with residents from this area who've had some major tax problems, and the people there say tough luck. And that's very tough, and it's unacceptable. And it's a real great example of how uber wealthy people intentionally don't want to pay tax here and use wealthy high-end accounting firms to negotiate when they get caught. So that needs to get changed. There needs to be a lot more money invested in CRA to get to the bottom of these before they become significant. There needs to be serious penalties, but there also has to be a lowering of tax rates in certain areas to encourage these individuals to not move their money offshore and to keep their money in Canada and reinvest in all our communities. Thank you.
And Alan Thompson.
Thank you. Well, clearly this is the ultimate example of how the wealthy benefit most from our tax code. I think it sounds like we all agree. I think the common sense answer is yes, of course, we should try to close loopholes like that. I think maybe the slightly more complex answer is, if you were a member of Parliament, and Ben has had that privilege for 10 years, what do you do about it? What is it that you actually advocate? What do we know about this issue? Beyond the simple solution, close the loophole, what can actually be done? And the only suggestion I actually heard on the table was lowering taxes for the rich so they think they should keep more of their money here rather than moving it offshore. I'm not sure that's something that I would advocate. As a member of Parliament, just to answer this question directly, I think the first thing I would want to do is learn more about this. Try to get beyond the simple common sense answer that we can all agree on. Close these types of loopholes. Keep this money in our country, in our economy. And every time we look at the way taxes are administered, we should be looking for ways to help those who need it the most. And those are people who are in lower income bracket, who need their government to step up for them. It's not the wealthy who need a tax break.
Thank you for that. That closes our questions that were received prior to tonight, and I have before me a new basket of questions from the audience this evening. We'll be picking out, excuse me, 3 of these questions and going through these next. So is this direct? So I think this is directed at everyone, and the first person to answer this will be Kevin Clerks. The topic is Indigenous reconciliation, and the question asked is, this month the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found the federal government to be willfully discriminating against tens of thousands of First Nations children, contributing to child deaths. Why? Oh, sorry, this is directed to someone. It's to Alan Thompson. So we'll start with Alan. My apologies. We'll start with Alan and move through the other candidates this evening. So I'll begin the question again. This month, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found the federal government to be willfully discriminating against tens of thousands of First Nations children, contributing to child deaths. Why is the Trudeau government continuing to disobey court orders and continuing to fight in court to treat First Nations kids unfairly? And then once following Alan's response to other candidates, what will your party do to reconcile with Indigenous people? So I'll go to Alan.
I think reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous people is one of the greatest challenges of our time. I think it's fair to say that this government and this Prime Minister has done more on this file than any preceding government in our history. This is an issue that has been more than 150 years in the making. It is a fundamental violation of human rights. It's going to take us time to figure this out and a lot of resources. And I don't know what my colleagues are experiencing, but sometimes on doorsteps I hear people pushing back on reconciliation and on doing the right thing and on devoting the kind of resources that are necessary to get this right, the time and energy and resources that are necessary to get this right. The particular court challenge that is at issue, I don't know enough about to give an intelligent answer, so I won't attempt it. But in a broad sense, you can look at a whole range of areas where we could do better by our First Nations. Boil water advisories, a simple, common thing that we take for granted. We open the tap and there's clean water. When this government took power, there were more than 140 communities with boil water advisories. 85 of those long-term water advisories have been lifted. There is a very clear target, a benchmark, and progress that is being made, and there is still work to be done on 58 of those advisories. So we can make progress. It is going to be complicated, and it's going to take us a long time. I just hope it doesn't take us as long as it did for the problem to come into existence in the first place, 150 years.
Call on Nicholas Wendler. This month, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found the federal government to be willfully discriminating against tens of thousands of First Nations children, contributing to child deaths. What will your party do to reconcile with Indigenous people?
I'm drawing a blank really right now as to what to say, but I know that our platform would cover this.
Kevin Clerks is next. Yes. This month, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found the federal government to be willfully discriminating against tens of thousands of First Nations children, contributing to child deaths. What will your party do to reconcile with Indigenous people?
Well, I think it's embarrassing and disgusting that it's taken 150 years to have a tribunal tell us this. We've known this for a long time now. People who are living on reserves, the First Nations people, are living in third world conditions. They don't have clean water in a lot of places. They have poor living conditions. And I think we've spent too much time with consultation and discussion. It's time we start moving forward on these things. Reconciliation, I think we've heard enough apologies. It's time to move forward. We put $21 billion every year into Indigenous programs. And where is it going? We need to give First Nations equal rights and responsibilities. We need to give them autonomy and self-reliance. And we need to make them responsible and owners of their own infrastructure. You know, I was talking about pipelines to somebody the other day, and pipelines brings a lot of money into some of these communities, and it's being blocked. Money where they could have their independence and have their infrastructure. And we were talking about pipeline workers and people who are unemployed in the patch. The 20,000 people or more that are unemployed in Alberta could have been laying water pipelines to these communities that will never see fresh water because of the pollution that is in their local water. I think we've had enough apologies, and it's time that we actually take action and get these things resolved. It should have been done decades ago. Thank you.
Tony McQuail.
Rupert Ross was a Crown attorney in Northern Ontario who's written 3 books, one, Dancing with a Ghost, which talks about the experience, his experience with Indigenous communities. And if you email me, I'll be glad to share my review of those books because they are fundamentally informative in terms of what we've lost by the way we've treated the Indigenous community and what we have to gain as a society if we do real reconciliation. The summary from our commitments document is, in partnership with Indigenous peoples, we're committed to fully implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, co-developing a national action plan for reconciliation, and doing our part to respect and advance Indigenous rights. We'll end discrimination against Indigenous children, which the health issues are part of that, and fund education, clean water, and restorative justice. And we're committed to taking immediate action on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, as well as the calls for justice from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. But I would also like to say that having watched our government dither for the last number of years, I got tired and I approached the Religious Society of Friends, my church, and talked to our Canadian Friends Service Committee Indigenous Concerns Group and said, couldn't we set up a reconciliation fund? And we did. And I now donate at income, well, actually I donate on Canada Day. I go back and look at my income tax form for the last year, assess 2% on my net income, and send that off to our reconciliation fund, because that's something each of us can do if we get tired of waiting for our government to get on with the job of reconciliation. So, you know, we can say government should be doing it, but I know that my farm came out of some rather crooked land deals with Indigenous communities, so I've been the beneficiary.
And Ben Lobb.
Thank you very much for the question. I would have to say, in regards to the question, that probably some of the best progress was made was under Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott. And I know that Charlie Angus of the NDP worked very closely with Jane Philpott, who was in Indigenous Services, and he felt that she was probably the best person who's ever been in that job and got the most done. And now she's kind of on the sidelines. And I think that's very unfortunate. I know there's a lot of circumstances that led to that, but I do think that Jane Philpott deserves a little bit of credit for the work that she's done. It is unacceptable that we have boil water advisories in any reserve. It's 2019, it's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable in Grassy Narrows, where I think 90% of the people have signs of mercury in their system because of the drinking water. It's unacceptable, and we have to do more. The other unfortunate thing is that I think in successive governments, the financial resources have been allocated. I mean, it's about a $10 billion a year investment we make each and every year, but yet in most cases we seem to be spinning our tires. And I think we need to overhaul the department once again and really become a results-focused, a results-driven department, and start to deliver results for the Indigenous people. Kevin is correct, though, too, that in some communities they are being held back, and they want to develop their resources. They want to build a pipeline to the West Coast. They don't want a handout. They just want to hand up so they can develop their own economies. And I think it's incumbent upon whoever is elected the next government to help those individuals like Kelvin Helene reach their goals and reach their dreams for their people and their communities. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question for all candidates, and we'll start with Kevin Clerks after I've read this question. The majority of Canadians believe that the protection of our environment is essential. Our air, soil, waters, all creatures, and plant life, from tiny to huge, plus of course our parks, greenbelts, and wilderness areas, so that we can provide our kids and grandkids with a healthy, decimated environment. It's my apologies. Can you give us an honest, dependable, absolute assurance that your party will not reduce environmental protections such as we have experienced happening under the current Ontario government? Kevin.
Well, you know, climate change is a big talk these days. I was in a local restaurant, and that was the first thing that somebody mentioned. And how is our current government going to deal with climate change? Why they're going to tax us some more. They're going to create the carbon tax or carbon pricing for some other government. And it's not going to change anything. Our money's going to go overseas. That's where all our tax money is going these days. You know, I said when carbon tax was first introduced, if it was going into parks and it was going into green spaces, I'd be all for it. But that's not where it's going. It's going into the pockets of someone else. First thing we need to do, same as the United States, is leave the Paris Accord. Why are we having the UN tell us how to do things? We're smart people. We can figure it out ourselves. We want to give power back to the provinces to adopt local plans to deal with the environment and climate change in our communities. It shouldn't be up to the federal government. It shouldn't be up to me to tell Alberta how to clean up the tar sands, and it shouldn't be up to them to tell us how to do things. We want to abolish the subsidies and let private players invest in green energy. Why are taxpayers paying for something? We've got all these wealthy corporations that could be doing it. They've got the research and the time to do it. And you know, it comes to cleaning up our own backyard. It's disturbing what's happening in other countries, but we need to focus on things we learned back in the 80s. Reducing, reusing, recycling, and taking the innovations that so many smart people across the country have come up with and put them into practical use. And that's what we're going to do.
Tony McQuail.
Well, I'm tickled at that question. Because, friends, as an environmentalist, every time you take a breath, every time you take a drink, every time you take a bite, the environment stops being something out there and becomes something in here, and some of it sticks around and becomes part of you. So taking care of the environment is not something about polar bears, it's something about our lives, our community, our children, and our grandchildren. And I had this made up for a while ago. But if you look at it, Hazel Henderson was an economist who said she got really tired of pie charts. And she thought it was time to have a cake chart. And she said it's a layer cake, folks, and the environment is the bottom layer. And everything else rests on top of it. And on top of that is the love economy, the economy of community and family, where we don't pay each other wages for supper, but where we share and work together. And on top of that is the public sector, which creates the infrastructure and the rules and regulations that knit us all together and let us live in, hopefully, peace and harmony, maybe even with love, hope, and optimism. And on top of that is the private sector, which is also a very important part. So yes, the New Democrats have believed in creating a healthy environment in the workplace, but we also believe in creating a healthy environment in our life place. I remember in 1988, the order of the day was a talk on climate change at our provincial council meeting. We've known about this stuff for a long time. We just aren't doing anything about it. And the time for magical thinking, oh, maybe it'll just go away if we ignore it. Or maybe if we declare a climate emergency and then buy a pipeline, nobody will notice. It's time for some meaningful action on this stuff. And if we'd started 40 years ago, we'd be in a hell of a lot better place. And if we'd started 11 years ago, when I was proposing we think about ride sharing,
I'll call next on Ben Lobb.
Well, I do agree. If we all lived our life like Tony did and were that committed, we'd be well on our way. So I do congratulate Tony on living his life and walking the talk. The Conservative Party, I'm very proud of the environmental plan and platform they brought forward. It's probably the most comprehensive environmental platform in any election by any party. There's three approaches. There's three prongs to the environmental plan: green technology, not taxes. In addition to that, the conservation of natural environment, and as well encouraging other countries and other organizations and businesses to purchase ethically and environmentally extracted gas and oil. Vitally important. A couple other things that we would do is we would stop the practice of dumping raw sewage in our lakes. I think that's completely unacceptable. And another thing I think that would be at value here locally is standardize our recycling programs from community to community, coast to coast. It's unacceptable that we recycle and we think we put things in the bin and it ends up in China or it ends up in the landfill. So we need to do a lot more with that. And I'd also like to see more environmental programs here in our own communities. So whether it's enhancing and expanding sewers in our communities, there are some communities in our area that need that. I think that's vitally important, contributing to conservation authorities as well, but also creating programs that will help farmers do their level best as they already do, but programs like crop and soil, so they can do great programs on farm drainage and other projects like that. So what is in the field and on the field stays in the field and doesn't end up in our creeks and streams. So that's our approach, and there's much more to it, and I would encourage everybody to take a look at the 50-plus page environmental platform on conservative.ca. Thank you.
Alan Thompson.
How dare we? How dare we? Why does it take the words of a 16-year-old who is wise beyond her years to make us see what is right in front of us and has been in front of us for a long time? We are destroying our planet. We can no longer talk in half measures about how to confront the issue of climate change and protecting our environment, not just for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren. I am proud of a government that has a solid record on this file, that has created more national parks than any other government before it, that is moving to ban single-use plastics by 2021, that has strengthened environmental protection, and probably most important is putting a price on carbon. It can no longer be free to pollute. We have to put a price on carbon, and every credible economist recognizes that putting a price on carbon is one of the most effective ways to deal with this issue and to encourage behavior. We've put forward a plan to cut corporate taxes for companies that will invest in green technology. We have to make this transition. It might take us a generation, but we have to start now. We have to get there. And I'm sorry, Ben, but I don't know very many analysts who regard the Conservative climate plan as a credible one or as the way to go. And I would just put forward to those here in attendance, I think the Liberal Party is the only party that is in a position to form government that has a plan to tackle climate change.
And Nicholas Wendler. I can repeat the question. The majority of Canadians believe that the protection of our environment is essential. Our air, soil, waters, all creatures and plant life, from tiny to huge, plus, of course, our parks, green belts, and wilderness areas, so that we can provide our kids and grandkids with a healthy, decimated environment. Can you give us an honest, dependable, absolute assurance that your party will not reduce environmental protections, such as we have experienced happening under the current Ontario government?
I would say, if anything, we would increase environmental protections. We have the highest we have the highest plan for reducing greenhouse gases, with 60% below the 2005 levels, and part of that would include increasing carbon sinks, which are forests, to help reduce, to help the environment and reduce carbon in the atmosphere.
And the last question this evening is addressed to Alan Thompson and Ben Lobb, so we'll have those as the first two respondents to the question, followed by the other respondents. The topic is USA relations. What do you think your leader will do to look after our Canadian interest when talking about trade and northern security? So I'll direct that question first to Alan.
The United States is our most important partner in the world, and I think it's also the most significant challenge for every new Canadian Prime Minister is to deal with the elephant next door. Now, there's elephants and then there's elephants. And what the Trudeau government was confronted with early in its mandate was the election of one of the most unpredictable, volatile, unconventional, un-everything president ever to lead the United States of America. And I am quite proud of the fact that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his team, led in this case by Chrystia Freeland, were successful in navigating the negotiations for a renewal of the NAFTA agreement. It was absolutely not a given that that was going to be the outcome of those negotiations. So I think the proof is in the pudding of how my leader and the government that I seek to join prioritized and dealt with Canada-US relations, and in some cases made very difficult decisions about other really important files that were on the government's desk. And I just want to point out to Tony, my understanding of the plans for electoral reform hit a wall when the NDP would not depart from its insistence on proportional representation. The Conservatives did not want any change, and the Liberal Party was advocating a ranked ballot system and chose not to use its majority to force through that option. Instead realized we need every bit of political capital we have to confront the United States led by Donald Trump and renegotiate NAFTA. And that decision was made.
And Ben Lobb as the next.
Just had to top Tony up there quick. I must disagree with Alan's version of the democratic reform. That's not how it went down, and I think the Liberals tried to railroad that one right from the beginning on ranked ballot, and thanks to some hard work by the Conservatives and the NDP, that was ended. So in addition to that, Alan mentioned about economists thinking the carbon tax plan is a great plan. I'd feel better if environmentalists thought that it was a great plan, and I don't know that we always hear that. And in addition to that, they're going to miss their Paris numbers by over 100 megatons. So I'm not sure where we should be applauding their plan. But with U.S. relations, the first thing I would have is I would not have Chrystia Freeland going to events insulting the administration. I think that would be a good first step. And the notion that we did a good NAFTA 2.0 is that's just not accurate. We were fleeced. We have nothing to show for it, and everything we did was we gave away to the agriculture communities basically. And for the auto that we got, we'll never ever see it because of the pressure for U.S. manufacturers to move home. So there's a whole lot of work to do to repair the relationship, and I think the Prime Minister and Chrystia Freeland, they own some of it. Obviously, the President is unique to deal with, I would say the least on that. That's where I would agree with Alan on that part, but I don't believe that Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland helped themselves at all in negotiations. And in addition to that, the deal was signed. It's not ratified, and it didn't deal with the steel and aluminum tariffs. It didn't deal with the softwood lumber, and it didn't deal with the Buy American provisions. So that is the all-time flop in negotiations as far as I'm concerned.
I'll call next on Tony McWell.
Yes, Canada gets to dance with an elephant on our borders, and it will be real interesting to see who's whether this impeachment process goes through or not as well. But we also have to recognize that we have a long-standing history, and the issues of the Auto Pact and other agreements that have been negotiated in the past could also serve as patterns for how to ensure that we do protect Canadian interests, and looking to develop greater security so we aren't as dependent on that relationship, because we are certainly not in the position of power when it comes to negotiating with the United States. So developing and diversifying trade will be an important part. And I have no idea how well Jagmeet Singh will do in dealing with a U.S. president. Certainly dealing with Donald Trump, there may be very serious problems for Jagmeet Singh, given Donald Trump's comments and behavior. So I wouldn't want to promise you that it's all going to be rosy. It probably won't be. But that's the reality for Canadians in dealing with the United States. And but we will certainly work with our bureaucrats in the Department of External Affairs to work on those portfolios that need attention, and to try and work in ways that don't piss off the President of the United States, and works to build the relationships that have been long-standing. We've had an undefended, for the most part, border for a long, long time. And at least they're not talking about building them. The joke was that the Canadians were going to build a wall to keep the Americans out. But anyway, walls don't really help. Communication and finding common ground and common interests is where you have to work. And we do have a lot of common interests with the American people and with their businesses.
And Kevin Clerks.
You read the question again?
Yes. What do you think your leader will do to look after our Canadian interests when talking about trade and northern security?
Well, let me tell you, trade and northern security. Northern security is meaning a whole different thing now that the ice caps are melting and everybody is getting nervous. But we're working on foreign policy. What will the PPC do? Certainly, we're not going to piss off the Americans. We're going to work with our allies to maintain order, but not only get out of, not only that, but get into conflicts that are in our strategic interest, not the interests of the United Nations. We are going to prioritize relationships with the United States again, because they are our closest ally, they are our closest trading partner, and when things get rough, we're going to turn to them. We're going to withdraw from the Paris Accord and the Global Compact on Migration, because the UN shouldn't be telling us what to do when it comes to our relations with other countries. We're going to liberalize trade with those other nations. We're going to sign as many free trade agreements as we can, but we're not going to get fleeced the way we did with the United States in NAFTA 2.0. And we're going to look at foreign aid. We're going to stop building bridges in other countries, and we're going to only be contributing money when there's a disaster relief or health issue. I think we need to look at taking care of our own first, and that begins with a number of issues that can't even be summarized up in one point. Thank you.
And Nicholas Wendler.
I believe the Green Party leader would do whatever she can to reduce the effects of climate change globally and ensure that the world is livable for a longer period of time.
That brings to a close our questions from the basket. We've had 6 questions altogether tonight. The last portion of our program is the closing remarks. Each candidate has the opportunity to have 5 minutes of closing remarks this evening. We'll be starting in reverse order from the opening remarks. So we will start with Kevin Clerks.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I'm a firm believer in democracy, and I'm very pleased to see everyone here taking a part in this process. Because it is my Canada and your Canada, our home and native land. As a true patriot respecting free speech and free expression, our party platform desires to bring equality and prosperity back to our land. We stand for freedom and fairness, respect and personal responsibility. Our Canada, our beautiful, glorious Canada, our true north, strong and free. From Southampton to Greenway, and from Lake Huron to Fordwich, my dear Canada, our Canada, I have chosen to stand up for thee. God keep our sovereignty democratic and free. O Canada, our Canada, so strong and so free. Please consider voting for me, Kevin Clerks, in support of the People's Party of Canada, and together we will save our Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Moving on then to Nicholas Wendler of the Green Party.
Thanks everybody for having me tonight and listening. And I stand
Thank you, Nicholas. Next, we have Alan Thompson, Liberal Party.
Thank you to all my colleagues for coming here tonight. It's good to have these kinds of debates, and thank you especially to you. This is a very important election. You have a really critical decision to make. And as I said at the outset, I think you are faced with a choice of two competing visions for how we govern this country. And I advocate that you choose a vision that helps us to move forward, to build on the progress that has been made and finish the job, rather than a conservative option which essentially looks to roll things back to the Harper years. And you heard about these competing visions tonight, and Carol, thank you for your work. Just one correction: when you were introducing the candidates, you introduced Ben as the representative of the Progressive Conservative Party, and the journalist in me made a note of that. There is no longer a Progressive Conservative Party. They lost the progressive label some years ago by choice. It's the Conservative Party. That fundamental shift makes it even more clear the competing visions that you face. And one of those is, I think, an issue that many people characterize as perhaps the most important challenge of our time, which is how we confront climate change. You are seeing very, very different approaches on that file, and you will have a choice to make. I was encouraged today, I had the chance to go to the South Huron High School in Exeter and meet with grade 9 and 10 students who are involved in the Eco Exeter project. They are trying to do something in their community about climate change, and they echo this young woman in saying to us, an older generation, you have to do this. You have a responsibility. You also face a competing vision, I think, in sort of how we do politics. I believe in the notion of positive politics and trying to do this differently. And Ben said in his opening remarks, you know, we shouldn't be slamming the other guy. And I agree with that. I think we've had a good, constructive discussion about where we differ on these policy issues. But I don't think it's negative politics to look at the policies and the statements of your opponents and point to people some things that are disturbing. And Ben, I have to say, your leader has been sharing rumors and mistruths and half-truths and Trump-style tweets. And that, to me, is emblematic of the competing vision that we face. We cannot start sliding down that slippery slope to the Trump style of political discourse. We cannot have our leadership take us in that direction. And I think that's part of the choice that you face. And a third aspect of it really is some of the most substantive sort of social policy issues that we face as Canadians. And one of them you see every day knocking on doors in this community, and it's the income disparity, the growing gap between the wealthy who are doing well and those who are struggling to get by. And the report that was referenced about those below the living wage, there's been very clear evidence in this riding. We have the lowest unemployment in recorded history, and yet businesses can't find workers to fill some of these jobs. A big part of that crisis is a lack of housing in our small towns and a lack of transportation. So I applaud those who support funding for public transit in major urban centers. I think that's an important part of the transition away from fossil fuels. But we don't have transit in our community. We need to look really aggressively at how we can promote the interests of those who live in rural communities. So again, I just want to close by reminding you of the competing visions that are now presented in front of you, the important choice that you have to make. And as I said at the outset, Canada could not afford another Doug Ford. We need to keep moving forward. And tonight, I'm asking you to make that choice, to choose forward, and to vote for Alan Thompson on October 21st. Thank you.
Next, I will call on Ben Lobb, Conservative Party.
Oh, thanks. Thanks very much. And I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. And I've likely participated in 40 or 50 debates, dating right back to when Paul Steckley was the Member of Parliament. And I've always done my level best to not insult the candidate. In fact, I don't really think I've ever insulted a candidate. And I often am baffled by Alan saying he runs a positive campaign, and then out of the next breath, he insults me. Now, I can take it. I don't mind that. I'm a big fella. But I find it a little fascinating that he says he wants to run a positive campaign, and then in the next breath insult me as a Member of Parliament. But be that as it may. I think we've had a great discussion tonight. I appreciate everybody here. I've worked very hard since 2008 to represent you as best as I can, regardless of your political leanings. I'm always open to a meeting. I'm always open to attending your public events. And I really respect the people in Huron Bruce. We have one of the most beautiful and unique areas in the country and perhaps in the world. And the low unemployment rate that we have here is no secret. It's because of the men and the women who live here, that work hard, who are generous, that think of their neighbor, and they think about what it means to be truly Canadian, to be truly proud of where you've come from. And I've door knocked tens of thousands of doors, really since 2005. It might even be getting close to 100,000 doors I've knocked on. And at every single door, no matter if the home's an $800,000, $900,000 home or it's a $150,000 home, the spirit and the people is one of kindness, optimism, and truly what it means to be Canadian. So it has been a true honor to represent you in Ottawa since 2008. I look forward to doing it again. I'm working hard to earn your vote and run a positive campaign, one that talks about the issues, one that talks about what I think the Conservative government can do to help improve Canadians, to help improve even what we have here in Huron Bruce. And I will not use insults. I will correct what I think is an opportunity with what one of the candidates says about their platform or what their leader has done. But what I would like to do is really talk about what the issues are. Trade, taxation, manufacturing jobs, our environment, infrastructure, seeing everybody get ahead, seeing everybody have a great job. Not just getting by, but really and truthfully getting ahead so that you can enjoy what it is to be Canadian. Thank you, God bless, and have a great night.
And Tony McQuail, NDP.
Well, Alan talks about two competing visions, and the fact that you really only have a choice between the liberals and the conservatives. Well, golly, you know, there are probably somewhat over 18 million voters out there. And who you decide will govern you in the next 4 years is up to you, not the liberals or the conservatives. And you know, 40 years ago, I did not see a competing vision between the liberals and the conservatives. In fact, they share a common vision in terms of serving the elites of our country when it comes right down to the actual choices they make. Not what they say at election time, not what they say in opposition, but what they actually do. There's a saying, actions speak louder than words, and I would recommend that you do a little Google search for a press release called Trudeau has net zero credibility on climate change. If you want to see the actual results, the fact that we ended up with the Harper targets after saying we were going to go beyond them. Just a whole litany of things where the promise was much greater than the delivery. And of course, I'm a little bitter about proportional representation and the promise to make every vote count. Because Justin Trudeau was either incompetent or just a liar or both if he says that a preferential ballot is the way to create a proportional parliament or legislature. A preferential ballot is the way to further favor the Liberal Party in federal politics. You know, like, I'm sorry, but if you're going to lie to us, at least do it a little more, with a little more finesse. So yeah, I'm kind of bitter about that, because I think the only reason you have to worry about strategically voting, either because you don't want a phony Trudeau majority, or you don't want a phony Scheer majority, or you don't want a phony May majority, or don't want a phony Singh majority, is because they didn't keep their promise. I mean, they could have done it, but they didn't. We intend to move forward on this with a citizens' assembly to actually develop what should have been developed by the Trudeau government based on what they promised. But why do I say there's not a competing vision between the conservatives and the liberals? Because they've had their phony majority governments since the 50s. We haven't had a true majority government. We've had the people elect a minority, but our electoral system give us a phony majority. And as a result, we haven't moved forward. We've slogged this way and then sloshed back as you get the policy lurch in the phony majority government situations. But by gosh, friends, you know, we're facing climate change, we're facing an increasingly inequitable society, and where do loopholes come from? You know, they're not like potholes. They don't just appear during the winter. Somebody lets them get created, or even works with the corporate lobbyists to create them. And who did that over the last 30, 40 years? Why, it was those phony majority governments that were liberal or conservative. So if there are loopholes that need to be closed, somebody created them, and it wasn't us, okay? New Democrats have not had a phony majority government. I hope we never do. I hope we end up with a system that ensures that we're all at the table, because I want my conservative neighbors and my liberal neighbors and my green neighbors and my NDP neighbors all to be together at the table working on what the majority of Canadians want. But if we're going to make steady progress, we need that, because we do. Regeneration, which is my second word, remember it was representation, regeneration, redistribution. Regeneration is talking about rebuilding the ecosystem on which we all depend. And as a farmer, I know if we start sequestering carbon in the soil as increasing soil organic matter, we're taking it out of the atmosphere and we're increasing the resilience of the soil. That's a huge opportunity for us in this rural agricultural community to contribute to the solution and make our farms more resilient, because they'll hold more water in the event of a flood, 25,000 gallons per acre more for a 1% increase in carbon in the soil, and they'll be more resilient in the face of a drought because of that water they're holding. A huge win-win-win. Environmental benefits are not at the cost of life. They're going to benefit us all. And they also can often be more cost effective. And on the redistribution side, if we don't start building a more equitable community in the economy, we're going to be in trouble. My dad used to say, money's like manure. It does the most good when you spread it around. And we've got a whole lot of really good ideas to take that money and spread it around so it benefits everybody. Thank you, and I hope you'll get your support.
So that brings our evening to a close. As your moderator, I would like to thank everyone as you in the audience as attendees for your listening abilities, for your questions tonight. I would also like to thank all the candidates for their responses as well. I'd like to turn things over to Mark for closing remarks.
Thank you, Carol. Ladies and gentlemen, Carol Leeming. And a round of applause for our candidates. Fantastic job, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank once again our Chamber Advocate sponsors, Libro Credit Union, CKNX Radio, and the Goderich Signal Star. Thank you to our volunteers from the church, from Rotaract, from Engaging Goderich, and from the Menacet HOA. Got it again. Did I? Right on. Also, thank you to Wendy's of Goderich, our beverage sponsors for the evening. Join us downstairs, meet the candidates, have a beverage. They should be bringing in ice cream in about 5 minutes. Good night to everyone at home watching on Rogers TV, Cable 6 Kincardine, and good night to you, our audience.